Well, we'll get rolling. Thanks everybody for being here for the Koochiching County Board of Commissioners regular meeting for Tuesday, March 25th, 2025. Would you please help me open with the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks everyone. First order of business is to approve the proposed agenda with additions under deletions. The only addition to note will be under considerations of this letter, which will go with item, let's see here, 12. E12. So there's a letter here that we all got that was drafted after the packet went out, so that'll go under E12. And with that, there is no additions and no deletions, so I'll try to accept a motion with that note.
I'll move.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Next up is to approve minutes from the March 11th, 2025 regular meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. Next up, financial business. Chair would accept the motion on items A, B, and C, which is approved courthouse claims, approved highway claims, and approved health and human services claims.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Any discussion on the claims? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. And next up is consider approval of warrant voids. Hey, thank you. We have, I think, let's see, 4 of them today. One for $90, one for $3.70, one for $16.59, and one for $400. All lost and have a verification and affidavit signed.
Make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Any discussion on the voids? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. Next up, we have a notice of fire. We'll give Brian a second. Thank you very much. I told you.
Running around.
I told you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Enjoy the sunshine today. All right. So, Human Resources, we have a notice of hire. So, we originally at the last board meeting had brought up that we hired Emily Carlson. Since that time, she ended up applying in December for a state position that's more aligned with her career path. And so she rescinded the offer that we had proposed to her. So since then, we offered to our secondary candidate, Emma Myers. She accepted and she started as of yesterday. So we want to welcome Emma. She's going to be fantastic in the new KC position, and we're very excited to have her.
Yes, welcome.
Secondary. So number B, we're seeking the board to accept the resignation of Milo Christensen as transport driver effective as of February 26, 2025 was the last assignment.
Chair would accept the motion to accept the resignation.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
That's all I have for you, gents.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Any discussion on the separation? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? And motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. All right, next up is consider approval of publishing a public hearing of proposed cannabis ordinance. I'll let Administrator Cole kind of take it.
Yep, I'm to that. So, at our last committee of the whole meeting, we unlocked the ordinance. The board made some recommendations based on the cannabis committee's recommendations. And in the ordinance, you guys gave the ordinance on page page 10, the recommendation of the board was wanting to provide further guidance in the ordinance on low potency hemp edibles. And so I drafted a couple different options. One, option 2 is language that Cook County uses. I think the board wanted to make sure that when these products are sold in retail establishments like gas stations, grocery stores, that they're behind the counter, only accessible by employees or in a locked case. And so the first option obviously is very simple and short. Low potency edibles and beverages must be stored behind a counter where public is not permitted or in a locked case. Option 2, I guess provides a little bit more leniency, but expects that these retailers have a plan. So that one reads, low potency edibles meant to be eaten must be stored in a locked case or behind the checkout counter where the public is not permitted, and at least 1 foot separated from a conventional candy and gum which can be sold to children. And then it goes on to say low potency hemp beverages must be stored in a location or using a method which provides increased theft prevention compared to non-hemp derived products. For example, top shelf, continuously surveilled by technology or staff, behind the counter or locked, and in that location labeled clearly as containing products only for purchase consumption by persons 21 and over. So a lot more in that, but looking for a recommendation from the board on how they want to finalize this section of the ordinance.
Simple better?
Simple's better. It looks good to me. Keeping it in a lock case just the way it's wrote there for Cook County's language. Yeah, that's fine with me.
Which option?
Option 2.
Thoughts?
This is just the one licensed place, or is this any convenience store or store could sell that stuff?
So low potency hemp follows a different statute than the cannabis does. So currently, low potency hemp products can be sold in grocery stores, gas stations, bars and restaurants, where cannabis can only be sold in retail cannabis establishments. So the state does not really dictate where low potency hemp beverages must be sold from. It doesn't dictate that they have to be behind a counter in a lock case. So I guess that's the big one here, is that if we want to provide additional public safety or public health by enforcing low potency hemp beverages being in a lock case or behind a counter, we would put it in this ordinance. So that's the purpose of this. So just looking, I don't know if you're going to make a motion on which option you want to go with.
For most
convenience stores have it.
Right.
I always buy it from the water section, so I see the cans up there, and then there's usually a little case in behind that has the other stuff, I guess. But I think as long as it's in a case and the stuff in the cooler is locked, that'd be fine.
Anyone willing to make a motion on option 1 or option 2? Okay. Option 2 is the low potency edibles and beverages must be stored behind a counter where the public is not permitted or in a locked case. Option 2 is a little bit, explains a little bit more and has a little more separation.
Make a motion on option 2.
Motion by Commissioner Roach for option 2, and then we can roll this into a public hearing. Is that okay? Or you want to separate?
Let's do separate.
Okay. So we'll just take this motion at first here for the option 2 under 5.4 storage product. Motion by Commissioner Roach. Do I have a second? Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner McIntyre. Discussion.
What if the store is really small and they don't really have, they're going to have to make a new space for it, or?
Yeah.
Well, that's what was one of my thoughts with the counter space. In some of these areas, it's not generous, I guess. In certain stations, they don't have a lot of counter space, but I guess I don't know. Yeah. In the second one too, I guess nobody wants anybody to be stealing. That's against the law. So they if they're stealing and they get caught, they're obviously going to get charged with theft. So.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
So option 2 does give a little bit more leniency. It allows them to have basically a plan in place. So if they don't have a lock case, they put it on a top shelf where they can put surveillance in, to help with theft prevention. Whereas option 1 is basically either it's in a lock case or behind a counter, which doesn't give some of our maybe smaller convenience stores a lot of options. But that's the second option that was just to provide a little bit more leniency if they have a plan in place. That's how I read it.
So yeah, I guess you can put it, as long as it's monitored, it sounds like with option 2, which it would give, I think of a couple of places that are not very big and they don't have a lot of room. So they could put it somewhere else, but then again, there's that option if you don't want it anywhere but behind the counter, well, then option 2 is, and if you want it just behind a counter or in a lock case, well, then option 1. So that's kind of the difference here, I guess.
Or option 3, don't have it in the store.
Or option 3, yeah, there's always that option too. So I think we actually, by statute, have to have this in place. Either that or you don't have to accept it at all. We don't necessarily have to, but we have to kind of have some, we have to have something set.
Right. All they have to do is meet zoning requirements and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Per state statute, we would just not register them. This is my understanding. We don't have to address low potency hemp, but the board wanted to address low potency hemp.
If they were selling low potency edibles, would they have to register?
Correct.
With the county?
Yep.
They don't currently have to.
Correct.
Those products have been out for quite a while.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
So that's the other side of this. If we have it in our ordinance, we're addressing it, then we would have them register with us annually for a fee, so we know where it's being sold. So if we get a complaint about
this would be
buyers or whatever, we can respond and we can make sure that we're enforcing our ordinance.
This would be like another license and to sell cigarettes or to sell beer, and now you've got to buy another license to sell low potency.
Yeah, I think we have an obligation with with the state right now for low potency, but nothing with the county. But when this goes into place, then we would have a period where they would need to come and register with us.
And who enforces it? The licensing?
Well, administration would process the registration, and then it would be up to, they respond to any type of complaint or issue related to low potency, and then they would enforce whatever language is approved as far as, if they don't have a good, storage system and people can just take it off the counter or off the shelf, or minors are, buying it or taking it, they can enforce the ordinance as written. Sheriff's Department, I guess if we needed to go to the county attorney's office to enforce it, then that would be a process.
Is that a regular process now, where periodically the law enforcement will check and see the compliance to the alcohol and tobacco?
It's complaint-based.
Complaint-based?
More than likely it would be complaint-based. We just don't have the staff to check all the licenses. We don't. So,
I don't hire anybody either.
Right. Yeah. It's catch-22 kind of. So. Any further discussion?
We're just voting on option 2 motion.
Right now we're on option 2, yes. Any further discussion? Right, so we have a first by Commissioner Roach, second by Commissioner McIntyre for option 2. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Next up, we'll take...
So I can just, Mr. Chair, I can explain the process. So now that we have a finalized draft of the ordinance, I'll make those modifications for option 2. And the next process is to bring it to a public hearing, and we have an obligation to advertise, publish the public hearing. We will do that between now and our April 22nd board meeting. So we'll have a public hearing at that board meeting. We can take input, and then the board could consider adopting the ordinance after the public hearing, or they could delay it based on any comments they receive. It would be up to the board on how they want to move forward after the public hearing.
Right.
So yes, I would like to request a motion to approve publication of the public hearing on April 22nd.
I have one more question. How about someone who owns multiple gas stations? Would they just pay one fee?
I think they have to do it per location, is how I understand it.
Now we'll go through the license committee.
Be a similar process, yes.
And that would go through, that would be, I think, the county attorney is involved with that.
Yep, so Margaret handles the application. Once she got everything complete, then they brought it through Sheriff's Department, county attorney, and then the auditors involved to make sure all the taxes and stuff are paid, are current. And then they make recommendations to the county board, and those registrations, as you see them for liquor and tobacco, come to the county board for approval.
Kind of a similar process, but separate entities and separate parcels would be individual licenses.
That would be the same as the alcohol tobacco.
Similar process. We've never really done
Each site would have to have it, and they currently have to have for alcohol and tobacco each site. Okay.
I'd accept a motion to have this public hearing on April 22nd, 2025 at 9:30 a.m. in the third floor of the store courtroom.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Howell. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. And this may be ever changing, so if there's something that needs to be adjusted, we certainly can bring it back and adjust it through zoning or wherever, through the committee or whatever we need to do.
Yep.
I think this is, I don't know that anybody really knows. I think the state is still kind of trying to figure out
How to do it.
Right. So, there may be other things that have to be adjusted and modified. All right, next up would be consider sending a letter of concern regarding mail delivery. I know several people, I think Commissioner Hill, I won't speak for him, but I've had some direct issues with mail service, along with some residents at our April or February 11th meeting in Little Fork, I believe. There was a couple of persons there at public comment that discussed their concern about the mail and service and things like that. So this letters that you see in the packet are to Congressman Pete Stauber, Senator Tina Smith, and Senator Amy Klobuchar. And they are, I'll read one here, they're all the same. On behalf of Koochiching County Board of Commissioners, we are requesting immediate relief in the mail delivery delay from the United States Postal Service. Koochiching County Commissioners have been receiving growing concerns from Koochiching County residents or citizens regarding the delays in receiving their mail. To name a few examples, the delivery delay has resulted in people not receiving their medications and medical supplies timely, late fees on paying bills, and businesses not receiving needed supplies and revenue timely. Citizens point to Koochiching County mail being transferred to Bemidji, Minnesota, then on to Minneapolis, Minnesota to be sorted before it is brought back up to Koochiching County to be delivered. Additionally, they cite a shortage of postal workers to deliver mail both consistently and timely. We have heard similar concerns from neighboring northern Minnesota counties who have also looked to their local government to request relief on their behalf. The citizens of our rural county rely on timely and consistent delivery of their mail for their health, well-being, financial stewardship, and success in business. Therefore, we ask that solutions to this issue be identified and implemented timely to eliminate the delivery delay. Please communicate your response, including solutions, to Mr. Adam Cole, Koochiching County Administration Director. Sincerely and signed on my behalf. That looks okay. That's what we'll send, and we'll follow up when we need to about this here and see where it's at. So, looks good. Thank you. Great.
Ricky's Corvette out there.
Yeah.
I'm in here though.
Pick up the whole place. That sounds good. And I think I would accept a motion to send these letters requesting some questions at least be brought into the service and stuff. So,
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Any discussion? I'd just like to thank the folks that come forward and contact and reach out to everybody. So letting us know. I think we've all kind of felt it a little bit and seen it a little bit, even with local mail delivery services changed a bit and due to staffing and whatever else. So I think that's definitely a legitimate concern of ours.
Refusal to deliver. The zip code tells them that it's not Koochiching County, and they go get things picked back. You can't deliver it. It's not in the. It tells them it's like in the Woods County. Yeah. And the west part. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, the zone kind of comes over and dips into there and goes to the west instead of coming this way. So I understand a little bit of that, how that is there, and they actually have a different postmaster in that area too for that. So
And we have citizens of Koochiching County getting summoned for jury duty in Lake of the Woods.
well, that's a good example of why the zip code should be.
Why they shouldn't have people like that in charge.
Yeah. All right. Any further discussion? We have a first and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. Next up is consider approval of alternative business furniture proposal. This is for the furniture in the law enforcement center and jail. Some of it obviously is specialty furniture, hence the price tag on some of these things. This was budgeted, but it is over the allotted amount that the POC can approve. I think we have a $50,000 approval limit at the Project Oversight Committee, and then this is kind of why this is being brought forward here, is for this board's approval. They kind of went back and forth, yes, and you may understand more about it. I think we kind of went back and forth on this, and we got bids in two different companies. I think to end up at this place.
Right, well, there's two RVs in the package for furniture. This one, when they went through the whole design process with the Sheriff's Department on what furniture they needed in each room, and then they went out, Sourcewell is a good purchasing program. Some of the pricing was better through Sourcewell, and some of the pricing was better directly through alternative business furniture, so that's why there's two different bids. And so it's been vetted by ICS, and this is POC's Project Oversight Committee's recommendation on furniture for the jail operations center. So the first one up is the direct purchase right from alternative business furniture. And the second one is through contracts, through NASCO contracts, and the contract for the rest of the furniture.
The first consideration is proposal for an alternative business for the grand total amount of $135,170.52 for furniture at the Koochiching County Jail addition and renovation project.
We only had 50,000 budgeted, and it came in at 135.
No, I think we had, I want to say 250.
I think we overall came in underneath the original furniture.
Yeah, we're below the budget.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly what was budgeted.
50
we're below that.
was the limit that the committee could approve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I understood anyway.
Yeah, we have a maximum approval of these, and this, since all this was a separate aside cost, this wasn't a part of the bid package. This was when you go through Sourcewell, you can get these costs right directly from them and maybe get a better price, because it is what it is to a certain extent. I mean, the retail pricing of it, they're not constructing anything; they're just selling you a product, kind of. So, but that's kind of the reason why it's separate. But it was budgeted for in the jail project, so there's funding available for it, and we are under budget. I thought it was 250 that we had on that.
I thought it was too.
So we're a little bit below that by a few bucks. And this motion would be for the first. We have one of two here. We have item 7 and item 8. We'll keep them separate. Well, there's
I'll make the motion.
sure. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. First one. Motion made by Commissioner Hall to approve the proposal for an alternative business furniture in the amount of $135,170.52. Do I hear a second?
Second it.
Seconded by Commissioner Roach. Discussion. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Next up, similar item. Different vendors under the alternative business with the vendors in Maspo and Herman Miller for the grand total amount of $57,756.58. And this will, from our discussions, will completely furnish the building. This will be everything. This will be the inmate cells. This will be all of the items needed for offices, safety furniture, all those types of
And
things.
we're still underneath our total budget that we had budgeted for, with both together
Yes.
by quite a bit, actually.
60,000.
Yep.
All right, I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Discussion. Hearing no discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. The next item is consider approval of course on builder's risk insurance. This is for the roofing project. It's prorated. Adam can discuss it a little bit further.
Yeah, for our construction contract, the owner is required to carry builder's risk insurance, so similar to how we done the Yale project. Hanover, this is we worked with on the building project, we quoted several vendors. Selective, right?
Selective, yes.
Yeah, so Selective was their recommendation. They did it on a 12-month annual period, and their bid for that is $1,338, but they prorated, so if the project's only 2 months, they prorated for 2 months, whatever that would be, less than $500. The other company that they quoted had a minimum premium of $500, so it didn't matter. They were cheaper, they were going to charge you $500. So the Selective insurance company was the recommendation to cover that project. I think looking at the time frame of the roofing project, it was like a 6-week duration from start to end. So, but we need this in place to move forward. But I think I think it's starting to
Okay. Insurance prorated, $13.38. So even if it's a couple of months,
$100 a month then, or
yeah,
120
it's a
a
shade
month.
over 100. Yeah, so. And we got to have it to do the project.
Yep.
I'll make the motion to go with Selective.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Any discussion? And then I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. The next item is a request of board adoption of resolution to execute Minnesota Department of Transportation grant agreement for airport improvement, excluding land acquisition. And the amount, the state, the federal committed is $0. The state committed is $69,718.32. And the grantee, which would be the city and the county, is $29,770.28. So the county share of this proposed resolution is $14,939.64. This is for building inside building improvements, or just for the field farm stuff?
I believe the field farm stuff is already done. This will be for the inside.
Inside the building, okay.
Yep.
Land acquisition. It was land acquisition?
No. Excluding land acquisition. I don't think we can put this property with the state funding it this year. I think this is for the updating some of the customs area
Yep.
and the baggage area, I believe. I remember.
Yes. You are right.
If you go to, it's kind of back in there, there's a letter from Mr. Matt Leben, Minnesota DOT Office of Aeronautics, and kind of gives you a little bit of a breakdown. Equipment upgrade was $68,097, SEH design, $5,000, administration, $500, and then additional terminal improvements would be $26,000 for a total of $597, which We would be splitting that up between the county and the city and the state. Wishes of the board.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Motion by Commissioner Roach, seconded by Commissioner Hell. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next up is consider adopting the attached resolution to use leftover funding from the 2020 bonding agreement to relocate the remaining funds to cover the runway phase 4 and GA apron project at the local airport. We'll get into and this is for the approach.
This is for the reconstruction of runway 422. The shorter run. It's the east-west runway. They're going to completely redo it on both ends of the airport that they did last year. Okay. So it'll be going on the west side of the main runway and on the east side of the main runway to do the aprons and the main runway itself. It is in pretty tough shape.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Roach. And wishes of the board.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall.
I'd second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Discussion. What's any idea of timeline on?
They were talking about starting this as early as they can, I believe in May. So, and to be done by the end of September, first part of October, I believe.
And will they'll obviously be out of service until that project?
Just the east-west runway, yes. The main runway will be operating as normal.
That's right. Okay.
Yep.
What's the timeline? Is it this year project?
This year project, yep, 2025.
No additional funds. This will cover all the.
Yeah, that's already been, it's completely budgeted for through the last thing through the state. Okay. So.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. Next up is to consider sending a letter to Senator Hochschild and Representative Scott opposing the proposed 30% reduction in the Sustainable Forest Incentive Act payments to landowners. There's an attached letter that was given this morning that we received that was not in the packet. Anybody wants a copy, we can certainly get that to you. Yes, please. Yes, and Eldon, come on up. Eldon Voigt, Soil and Water Supervisor, is going to speak to this and the impacts of this reduction.
Okay, so there's a lot of, so I guess I'll just start off the background. In the December budget from Governor Walz, he proposed cutting the SFI budget by 30%, reducing the payments by 30%. Now it's gone one step further. It's in Senator Ann Ress' tax committee, and in her Senate file, she's also requesting to reduce it by 30%. If you reduce the payments by more than 10%, landowners can remove their land. Koochiching County has the most land in the SFIA program. I think it's roughly 260,000 acres. If you just reduce the payments to the Koochiching County landowners by 30% and nobody removes their land, it'll have a negative impact, approximate negative impact to Koochiching County of just under $1.5 million. So, I mean, it's a big negative impact. There's three counties that are really affected. They're Koochiching County, Itasca County, and and the St. Louis County. So I guess I'm just asking the board to oppose this, and Nathan wrote a really good letter opposing the reduction in SFIA, and just send it on to Senator Rep and copy Senator Hauschild and Representative Scraba. I guess one other thing I would ask is if Commissioner Hill would just forward that on to the Northern Land Use Board. If you look at the total negative economic impact to the counties in the Northern Land Use Board, it's $4.9 million. I mean, this would have a huge negative impact. Now, the one thing I'm really passionate about this is I live here because I love the hunting fish, and that's why I'm here. There's no other place in the United States like this where you can, go out and walk down a trail and the bird flies off and you can go in there and hunt it. If it's reduced by 30% and the large landowners would remove their land, they would no longer be required to allow people to have non-motorized hunting and fishing access. I'm not saying they would, but they could do that. And that would really affect areas like the Sheep Ranch Road, not so much the Haney Road. A lot of that land is in a separate easement. But there are a lot of areas that this could really negatively affect the county. And I'm just looking at this from the economic point now, because that's, where the rubber meets the road, right? There's a lot of conservation things that go along with this. So that's what I'm requesting.
Thank you. Well explained. Well done, Nathan. You have anything to add, Nathan?
No, I think Eldon covered it pretty well. And since this issue came up early last week, we heard about some other potential bad news yesterday with the bill payment that the county received directly. But, one other point to make, so for private landowners in Minnesota, there's kind of two property tax relief programs for forest landowners in the state. There's the SFIA, and then there's what's called the 2C managed forest law. And, Koochiching County, because of land values that from the top of the line, SFIA tends to be a better program for private landowners in Koochiching County, but 2C is an option. But the draw or the negative from the county standpoint on 2C is that's a direct reduction in the appraised taxable value of that property. So, some counties don't have as many private acres in SFIA, but they probably have, as a total, there's probably more acres in 2C just because of the land values of other counties. And 2C is a better way to go for them, but if we have a mass exodus of landowners from SFIA into 2C, that's got to have some kind of a bottom line impact on the county as well. So
I saw the number on 2C for Koochiching County last week, and now I can't remember the exact number, but I think it was around 500 acres. So there's not a lot in the 2C law, but there's, like you said, 260,000 acres in the SFIA.
Yeah, typically, at least in Koochiching County, James can probably speak to this better than I can, the 2C in Koochiching County probably really only comes to play when you're on water. You have waterfront property that's a higher value.
That was our request.
Thank you. Wishes of the board.
Make a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Nathan. Next up, we consider appointment of County Extension Committee member. So I'll get through here. On behalf of the Koochiching County Extension Committee, the University of Minnesota has requested the county board to appoint Lois Baylor to a 3-year term as member of the Koochiching County Extension Committee beginning May 1st, 2025 and ending December 31st, 2027.
I'll move.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre. Any discussion? Should be a great addition.
I have to talk kind of long.
Very much appreciated. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And motion carries. And thank you, Lois. Next up, we consider a burial approval. Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going today?
Good. How are you doing?
Very good.
Hey.
Got a short one for you guys today. Just looking for authorization of payment in amount of $753.43 for somebody who qualified under our county burial policy for interment.
Hey, Commissioner of the Board.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach.
A second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Shortest one of the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Next up, Dean.
Yeah, so what I've got going here, we'd like to expand our control access system by 6 control systems. Been working with the court system for a while now, and they've identified some areas that they'd like us to tighten up a little bit as far as safety goes around here. And those areas are one system would go on the end of the hallway on the 2nd floor of the court, the judicial wing, on the stairway access side. On the east end of the judicial wing, on the 2nd floor, down the left hallway all the way down to the end. They like it on the stairway side of the doorway there, so therefore that people that enter that stairway can't come up the back side and get in without the bailiffs. They can't see anything down that hallway. I put up a mirror for them once, and
On the back side of that stairway.
yeah, and it's kind of a problematic area because people can come up beside the bailiffs or gain access to the office there without anybody knowing. They can come up that back stairway. So we've got to secure that area there. And then coming through the doors out into the vintage courthouse are our probation offices. And there's 3 doors there. There's the main doorway where they check in, and then there's the 2 doorways that contain the probation people. Now, the 2 doorways, actually the 2 doorways are the vintage doors that you see like on the court here, with the real brittle glass in it and stuff like that. So there was quite a discussion on if we could even do this or not. And so roundabout way, yes, we can. American Eagle Securities has assured me that they can put an access system on those doors without issues and stuff like that. So those are the other 2 doors that need to be done. Also on those doors it's a simplex system. If you notice the door there's a great big block with a handle on it. And every once in a while, they call me and I have to go up there and change the code in it. So that's how they're safeguarding their office spaces right now, is they punch a number into that and then go through the door. And so it would be nice to have them onto our system and be done with these other coded features. There's some maintenance to do with them once in a while. I got to replace them from time to time, and it would be nice to have them onto our system so that they can have fobs for their doors as well. And then coming through the vintage courthouse down to the front north door, the main front north door that faces the north, coming up the steps there. We'd like to do that one as well. That one's going to be a little bit tricky, only because that's a fire access as well, or egress or whatever you want to call it to get out or whatever. It's got to have a crash bar on it so that people can just hit the door to get out. But yet we want to have a fob system on there too as well. And in order to do that, it'll be a little bit tricky. There's going to be if you can envision this, there's going to be a lot of hardware there because the way that the integrity of the door would be destroyed if they tried to chisel this thing apart to try to put these things in there. So it's all got to be surface mounted. And so the activation rods or whatever are going to go up and down. They'll drill into the floor, and when these doors lock, they'll slam up rather than out. And then the crash bar on there to be able to get access out. And then coming from the outside would be the door fob, where you'd snap your fob to get into the door.
That would be after hours then?
And yeah, after hours. A little more to that, Adam. Our system is designed to where I can close this building down at a certain time. I can type into it 4:30, all these doors are going to lock, bang. And so only people that have access will be those that have fobs. And not only that door, but the south wooden door that is right below us here, that goes out into the parking lot here. They want that one done as well. And the same thing would be done there too as well. However, that'll be a little easier. They were able to get the actual contraption that runs these electric strikes and stuff on that door. It's big enough and it's not going to be a problem. We have access to take care of that. So, but those are the doors that are involved.
Okay. How about if we move probation? Are we going to be able to take those locks with us?
Well, I think they might stay right on the door, because if that turns into a visiting judges' chambers, and then on the southern side of it, if that becomes visiting attorneys' areas, I think the doors will still be fobbed, and they would probably be issued a visitor's fob from the court administration. I can set them up to have a certain number of those hanging there, so they could issue those people those to gain access to those rooms.
So this will be the second floor install. That's a whole door and everything up there by the stairwell.
No, just an access, fob access. Yeah, okay. Electric strike.
Okay, and then it'll be the main front doors.
Yes.
And then the probation doors.
3 of them.
3 of those, and then the back door as well as part of this. The back. Not that door this time?
Front and back door.
Oh, front and back door.
Front and back door, yeah. This back door right back.
Okay. All right.
And this is all part of that safe and secure courthouse grant. So
yeah, correct.
It's a 50-50 match. Budget for this year, so I think we're just looking to move forward with that project.
Yes, I know that American Eagle Security will be doing our jail systems as well, and so I want to make sure that if he shows up and starts pulling wire over there, I've got another job for him over here. So I'd like him to be able to either start here and go over there, or go over there and come back here, or whatever. He's got some work here done. So.
Well, thank you.
After hours, emergency access. Somebody drives past here at 3 o'clock and sees smoke coming out of the room. Does the fire department have fob, or how would they gain access in an emergency?
Yeah, all our emergency people have fobs for this building. All our buildings. Yeah. Forest Land as well.
Sheriff's Department, fire department.
Sheriff's Department, Fire Department. I think there's usually knock boxes on the entrances of these buildings where anybody that needs to get into our buildings can smash those boxes and away they go. So. Or not smash them, unlock. There's a common key to all of them. Yes, no smashing.
Yeah. Right, which is of work. So the city amount, just for clarification, would be it's a 50% match, correct?
Yeah, 50-50 deal.
And that would be half of the 29,225.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, in that 29,225 is the court admin window as well.
Okay.
So it's all those 6 fobs and a court admin window.
Yeah, that's all included in this grant that we're working with.
That was the whole grant package. So.
Oh, we got the grant, don't we?
Yes, correct.
I'd make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach.
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner McIntyre. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
Hey, Nathan.
Morning.
Noxious weeds.
Yeah, so this is an annual requirement that we have to get the county board chair signature on this general notice to control or eradicate noxious weeds, and we're going to publish it in the official newspaper by May 15th each year. So.
Anything you're focusing on this year for weeds?
I mean, it's the same parsnip and those type of things. Knapweeds, parsnip, buckthorn. Soil and James at Soil and Water, he's done some pretty good projects the last few years with buckthorn removal within city limits here. So but it's an uphill battle against noxious weeds. I know there's proposals in at the legislature this year to try to get a little bit of funding for all the counties for noxious weeds, but we've had that proposal in the last 5 or 6 years, I think, and it hasn't went anywhere. So probably a good chance it won't this year too. So.
All right, Commissioners of the board.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Thanks.
Opposed? And motion carries. Thank you. Friends.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
How is everyone?
Doing well. You got a project here.
Yeah, so we got 2 items on the agenda. The first one being the awarding a design build contract for the new MISPA garage. If everyone remembers, back in January, we got approval to do an RFP, request for proposals, for the shop, excuse me, down in MISPA. The RFP was written so that contractors had the opportunity to also propose specific designs that could potentially benefit the county while building. We put that RFP request out. We received RFPs from 4 interested parties. Excuse me. In the RFP, we just did a kind of a generic RFP. We gave dimensions, we gave certain things that we wanted to see, number of windows, in-floor heat, things like that, floor drains. But again, let the bidders or the contractors kind of decide where they wanted to go with that. We gave them the option of wood frame, metal frame, all that. Again, I said 4 RFPs were submitted, or proposals were submitted. We ranked those 4. We had NCI, we had Hawk Construction, we had FCI, and we had J&J. After reading through the proposals, we ranked J&J as the top scorer for this. All the proposals were, 3 of the 4 proposals were within 0.5%. You can see the actual lowest one is NCI at about $583,000. J&J was $587,000. Hawk was $589,000, and that FCI was $625,000. Now, when we were scoring these, we ranked the building that they were proposing as well. So 3 of the 4, they proposed a post style, kind of cold storage type building. Poles were 8 feet on center, rafters 8 feet on center, and then purlins in between. J&J proposed a stick frame, 2x6, with sheeting all around it, as opposed to just putting the metal on top of the purlins. And then also spray foam insulation. That ranked them quite high with respect to that. Yeah, the building they were offering is just a lot more stout of a building. Rafters, of course, were 24 inches on center versus 8 foot with the purlins. So that's the reason we went with them. The prices, they're all just right there. So
It's a lot better building.
So your
Yeah.
recommendation is J&J is kind of the best bid for the money.
yes, correct. This is a budgeted item. At the time, we budgeted $500,000 with state aid paying for 78%, the county paying for the remaining 22%. These bids are a little bit higher than that. We did, after we did the engineer's estimate, we did add a couple things. We made an 8-inch concrete floor mandatory. We made the in-floor heat mandatory. So
Good idea.
it brought things up a little bit, but the local portion of it would be approximately $130,000. The state aid portion would be approximately $460,000.
What would the in-floor heat be? Propane boiler, natural gas boiler?
Propane. Propane down there.
Propane, yeah.
Okay, boiler.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned this may have to have a septic as well.
Yeah, we will likely have to drill another well and put in a septic, depending on what Matt says back there.
Don't show him anything.
Yeah.
As for forgiveness.
Porta potty.
Give permission. Ask forgiveness.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
What about the floor drains? Where's that going to go?
Floor drains will go into the sewer as well, but they'll have a trap.
What sewer?
What's that?
The sewer you're going to, like the mound sewer?
Yep. Yeah, I believe it has to go in there for treatment.
Well, it has to go somewhere, but I don't know if you can mix the two. But anyway, that's.
Go through a
I was sure there was a small city sewer like they have in Mizpah. There's not Mizpah. Margie. Didn't they do something there years ago? Wagner was down there and did something down there.
Mizpah, I think everybody's separate.
Separate.
Their own personal systems. Yeah, I'm open to ideas when it comes to that. So. And
because if you put that in there, I think it ends up killing all the bacteria in the septic tank.
Sure.
You got everything, right? Salt and the calcium chloride.
But it will go through a flam trap. It has
Yeah,
to
but
go
that
through
doesn't
flam
matter.
trap.
Yeah, the flam trap only keeps the scum off the top. It doesn't. The chemical's still in the water, and you put that in the septic tank, and it almost has to be. I think a holding tank, flam trap, and then a holding tank, which would be maybe on its own separate mound or dispersal area, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Could it go into a holding tank and then storm sewer?
That would be a question for someone else.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's
We have a holding tank at our facility, and the number of people that go in and out of there in the shop, and you have to pump it. Very seldom.
Yeah, if you were going to have the floor heat in there anyway, it's going to evaporate a lot of that out. And it might be that you could just literally put a holding tank and pump it. Get it pumped. If it was a 2,000-gallon tank, it might take a while for it to get it.
Especially with evaporation from the inflow heat.
Yeah.
That makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
And like I say, that can be in its own trench. It's like a drain tile around the house. Other than this, it's got more stuff in it. But, yeah.
And you're budgeted obviously for this year for the bit of an increase, and of course you had a couple of additions.
Correct. The increase on our side of $30,000, I would use fund reserves for that.
Okay to cover that little extra. Okay.
Where's J&J from?
In town here.
Jim let him.
All right, wishes of the board.
I'll make a motion to accept it.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach, and that would be J&J.
Yep.
All right, second by Commissioner Hall. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
That's exciting. It really is.
Well, it's in pretty rough shape, I think, so I think it's going to be a really, really good improvement there and kind of boost the morale a bit too, I gotta believe.
We'll be able to leave the plows on the truck instead of taking them off every day. It'll be a major savings just on time, taking off and putting on every day.
Yep. And the bathroom we'll have a full door rather than the swinging doors.
Come on, you gotta take something out of the old building.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be 6 water in it in the spring, right?
Yep.
A picture of the building goes in there in the building. All right, and you are gonna have a contract through, it's like Edwards?
Yeah, the second item here, typically we go out and kind of work with St. Louis County on our calcium chloride bids. They usually get pretty good bids because they use 500,000 gallons a year plus. Lake County also goes in with us. They use 300,000-400,000 gallons of calcium chloride. And here we are with 25 to 30,000 gallons. But in last year's contract, St. Louis County put in there that we could contact the winning bidder and negotiate our own prices, basically. So that's what I did. Reached out to Edwards Oil. They've got a small increase, it's about 4 cents a gallon, depending on the time that we have it spread. If you look on that next page there, so before June 1st, it'd be $1.54 a gallon. After June 1st, $1.62, and after July 15th, $1.54. We typically get it put on our roads around mid-July, so we would fall in that after July, $1.54. Yeah, just looking to renew our contract with them for that $1.54. And again, like I said, we use about 25,000. There's years where we push 30,000, but never over.
Mine, this is laid out too and put down, so.
Correct. Yeah, St. Louis County and Lake County, sometimes they get it delivered to their shop and then they do the application on specific roads.
Yeah.
We have everything distributed through Edwards Oil.
Okay.
So one of our guys sits in the truck and tells them where to go, and
That's what they do?
yeah.
Excellent. Okay, wishes of the board.
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Commissioner Agatalia offers a continuation of calcium chloride contract with Edwards Oil at probably the 154.
154.
154. And do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Erickson. Discussion.
The application, you said Edwards Oil does that?
Edwards, yeah. Yep. So
So that's on top of the $1.54 though, right?
that's included in the $1.54.
Really?
Yes.
Call the vote.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Yeah.
And motion carries.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent.
Right.
Good morning.
There's our packet. I knew it.
I knew he wasn't going to
Well,
show
I
us.
thought this is for later in the discussion, but you can pass it around. This is later.
Okay. Thank you. that.
So that, we're not dealing with that right first there, so just thought I'd give it to you.
So first up is to consider a contract with Lake of the Woods for construction and demolition.
Right, the Solid Waste Advisory Committee met on Tuesday, March 4th to review a request from Lake of the Woods County. Lake of the Woods County is planning to close their demolition landfill at the end of 2025 because of the MPCA requiring lining and leachate treatment at their site. Lake of the Woods County is exploring disposal options at their demolition of their demolition waste due to the high costs associated with the requirements. They've asked Koochiching County if we'd consider allowing them to dispose of their demolition waste at the Koochiching County Demolition Landfill. Our in-county disposal charge is $12 a cubic yard, and our out-of-county disposal charge is $18 a cubic yard. When the Solid Waste Advisory Committee reviewed everything and looked at our costs and tried to come up with what was a reasonable amount, and understanding they're a partner and we want to treat them right, but also at least cover our costs. They recommended negotiating a construction and demolition waste disposal contract with Lake of the Woods County with a disposal charge of $18 per cubic yard, which is the same as our out-of-county waste fee. We would also include a termination clause, which will allow us to either renegotiate or terminate the contract with reasonable notice if our costs change or conditions change or unknown things are coming up. So. And I provided a lot of information. Of course, the request from Lake of the Woods County, and then in the summary of the meeting, I provided kind of a breakdown of our costs associated, calculating what Lake of the Woods County's share of costs would be, and the fee proposed is more than what we're estimating our costs to be. So, and based on Lake of the Woods County's estimated volume per year, and I averaged it out over the last 4 years or 3 years. It's anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000 of additional revenue, less our expenses, of course.
And then just loaded the trucks on the way back.
Well, so there was discussion about, there was a separate item, how they transport it to us versus whether or not we consider taking the waste and at what charge. If they want to, however they choose to try to haul that material to us, they'll have to negotiate or account for that cost, on their own. If they wanted to use our trailers that are coming back from Marquette landfill, so on a backhaul, we have a backhaul policy in place that Manco can use that reimburses or gives a credit to the county based on that backhaul. So there is a policy in place. If we found based on unforeseen things that might be affecting the trailers or anything else, we could take a look at that and re-establish a new policy if we needed to. But right now we have a policy in place that covers that. And then they could negotiate with our contractor if they wanted to based on that policy and come up with that. So at the time they established the policy, I think they had a backhaul, a Beats or something way out west, or I'm not sure exactly what it was that they were proposing to haul years ago as a backhaul, but in any case, the county established that backhaul policy. But that's a separate item from today. Today, we're just, I'm requesting the board to consider whether or not we should accept the waste and at what price.
And length of lease and terms and things like that will be at a later date then, when anything gets signed and...
Yeah, I certainly can bring a contract back to the county board for final approval, whatever the wishes of the board are. I could also work with the county attorney to come up with language that he believes it protects the county and that we believe that would be good for the county, but I'm not opposed to bringing that contract back here for final approval once we have negotiated it and gotten all the terms set.
Right. And, looking at it down the road, if we have to line our area as well, potentially in the future, this might be a benefit for us to accept the regional approach, at least as regional as we can get, in order to maybe garner some support with some funding for the potential lining or leachate that we may have to do in the future. So it would be and I think we had a trial kind of figured out this summer perhaps, just to kind of get a couple loads up here or take a week's work or whatever the plan was, and just kind of see how it was, because they have a little bit different operation than we do. They grind theirs, I think you said?
Yeah, so they have a grinder that they use for their demolition material. They said they could either grind it and send it to us ground up or send it to us loose, whichever we prefer. And we'll consider all options, whatever's best for us, And we talked about other benefits, of working together, of course the grinder that's a $500,000 piece of equipment, very expensive piece of equipment, very nice. They've talked about, maybe there's some beneficial use that we could get from, maybe we could separate shingles and grind up shingles. They do that right now, and they use it as a, mixing it with gravel and put it down on roads, some of their shingle material. And there's various other beneficial uses that we could go down the road. This is just a start. If we go down this path with Lake of the Woods County, I see it as a win-win for both Lake of the Woods and Koochiching, because I think we can cooperate a lot on different potential beneficial projects. And this is just one of potentially more to come. And PCA wants to see counties do more of these cooperative efforts because they believe that it's, and I would agree with them, it does benefit both counties, the taxpayers, when you can find those efficiencies that make sense. There are new rules that are coming down that they haven't finalized yet on demolition landfills. It's basically being pushed on them right now because of their site being all sank. And they've got to renew their permit, and MPC won't allow them to renew without a liner and leachate management, and it's expensive. So if that hits us, that'll be no different than anywhere else, so that'll be a renegotiation at that time, and we'll have to look at that. And Lake of the Woods County understands that. So. But it would also give them the option to move out if they felt like it didn't make sense for them to over time. So. And yes, we're going to receive some of their waste this summer just to try it out and see how it goes. This contract wouldn't take effect until potentially the fall of 2025. So.
Well, it's great to see that cooperation and stuff between the counties, and mutually it is a benefit for both, I think, reasonable for them and reasonable for us, I think. So thanks for all the work on it. And, it's a lot to put together and a lot to consider, but it was presented really well, and we met with a couple of commissioners that come up and visited with us at the SWAC meeting there, and they were very open to discussion and whatever, just as a good option for them. So appreciate them coming forward too.
And if you go to page 2 of the meeting summary, kind of lays out what we estimated our cost to be and how much it was per yard, what we thought that we'd have to charge Lake of the Woods County to break even. So.
Yeah, and you laid it out with equipment, time, everything is built into this factor as well, with this formula. So it's really quite clear, I think, too, and not extravagant or anything that I can see. It's the wear and tear and the time and labor and things like that. So.
Great. I spoke with Anthony Perkle from Lake of the Woods County, who's the person that made the request for the county, and talked to him about the recommendation of $18 per yard, and he felt that was reasonable, but subject to his county board approval, of course. So.
And they approved it already?
No, the county, so we have to first let them know that we're interested and tell them what price we're thinking. And then I think what we'll do is then put together the contract that they could present to their county board, and then we would have them approve the contract, and then I'd bring it here for final approval. So.
Right. So today's moving forward with at least a per yard cost and then negotiating the terms and length perhaps into that. So then we'll come back at a later date.
Yes, I can do that.
See how that goes. Okay.
No problem.
So that's what we'll be approving here today. Is authorize Matt to go out and kind of got a number that we can start with at least, and then kind of tie up the terms of the lease and everything with correspondence from Lake of the Woods. So I would accept the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Present that. Thank you, Commissioner Helms.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Erickson. Discussion. Thanks for all the work on this too. We're going to go put it all together.
Thank you.
Great. Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries.
So the second item on the agenda that I have is solid waste abatement request. Solid waste fees have been placed on residential tax statements or for non-residential billed for many years. The solid waste ordinance states the county board can establish fees to help offset the cost of managing solid waste throughout Koochiching County. The minimum fee established by the county for this type of property is $70. Nonprofit ownership, schools, churches, state of Minnesota, and federal buildings are included in our solid waste fees. This property is a church building and is charged the minimum $70 solid waste fee. One of the members of the church, or one of the caretakers, Todd Koochiching, asked if the church could be considered for an abatement, and I've included a copy of his request. The Solid Waste Advisory Committee reviewed the request at their last meeting and unanimously recommended to deny the request, as under the guidelines, this parcel received the proper assessment, proper fee. And I provided again the kind of the breakdown of information.
Wishes of the board. And what are we actually paying? $70 is about what it is?
$70 is the fee at this time, unless in the future the county may change that fee, but that's what it currently is $70. And again, other buildings similar to this building receive the same fee. The way that we determine fees, it's based on tax classification that the assessor sets on each property, and we establish fees for any parcel that has a building value of $1,000 or more. So this building, and you can see in the pictures, definitely has a greater value than $1,000. I included those in the information there. The old church, but we have schools, hospitals pay the fee. Government buildings, businesses,
nonprofits.
Everybody is subject to the fee. There are some
special events that are
special things that might be considered for abatements. Sometimes, like on a residence, they might have multiple parcels next to them, and they have their personal garage on a separate parcel. So in that case, we in the past have considered them a part of the main parcel, and so one fee would be applied. But separate standalone garages, a mile away from someone's home, gets the fee. And again, we have other, there are many other churches that receive the fee, and this is consistent with what they would be charged as well. And in the ordinance itself, it specifically states that churches are subject to it, so. And that's the discussion at the Solid Waste Advisory Committee was just that. How do we be consistent in the way we approach it?
Right, wishes of the board. The motion to approve the abatement or deny?
Move to deny.
Motion by Commissioner Erickson to deny the abatement request.
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner McIntyre. Any discussion? I think that's just it, is just the consistency. It's not that it's, in the middle of nowhere, because there's lots of places that are in the middle of nowhere that could charge for that solid waste fee, and that's kind of how we support the program, and we all know that program always works sometimes and doesn't always pay for itself. I really think that keeping it consistent and special events, I guess I'm not opposed to that type of thing, but we have lots of churches that could then benefit and say, well, geez, I only eat one day a week, or something to that nature. And not that that's not true, but it just, would that be fair? If you do it for one, would you be consistent for all? So, I'm not opposed to that either. It'd just be quite ahead of, the 30 churches that we had in the county to say, hey, we don't want to do that either. So, and I know they have events and special events mostly, besides their Sunday service, a lot of communities have their events there at those types of places too. So that was just a consideration, not to be harsh or unfeeling of it all. I guess it's just to be consistent with it. So, any other discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Just to let you know that the Solid Waste Advisory Committee is reviewing the fees. Again, we'll review all of our fees and all of our tipping fees and plan, I've asked them to make a recommendation to the board about our fees, considering what our costs are for management of solid waste. And I know that in the budget process, you guys have talked about how we have to try to look at the operations and how can we, continue to maintain services and pay for them at the same time. And so I just wanted to let you know they're reviewing that, and I hope that by budget time we'll have some kind of recommendation from them on that. So.
All right, any further discussion? I have a first and a second. If there's no other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
So the last item on the agenda is for the environmental services is the DNR presentation on the floodplain program. Koochiching County adopted an updated floodplain ordinance in 2022, which included FEMA's updated floodplain mapping, and we've heard a lot of discussion from the public about that mapping and some of the issues surrounding permitting of buildings and the use of their property. We've shared mapped areas of concern with the DNR, and they've indicated they plan to look at some of these areas. Seal Strauss, State Floodplain Manager, and Jeff Weiss, Floodplain Engineer from the DNR Ecological and Water Resource Division, have graciously offered to give a presentation on the floodplain program and mapping, as well as update us on their efforts to study areas of concern within Koochiching County. And Seal and Jeff, are you online? Can you hear us?
We can. I can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Did you want to share your screen with the presentation? I did hand out paper copies to the board of the presentation, but let's see if you can share your screen.
Yeah, I'll try sharing to see if that works. And I'm going to just share just the presentation with the slides off on the side, if that works for you all. Sometimes you could go to presentation mode and it changes things inadvertently. Anyways, are you guys seeing my screen showing the PowerPoint slides?
We do.
Okay. You want me to go ahead and jump into things, or is there any other kind of intro you all want to discuss before we jump into the presentation?
Well, yeah, maybe I just appreciate you taking the time to present this here. I know it's kind of been a concern and an ongoing conversation amongst our group here. So I appreciate you taking the time. Maybe we'll just go around and introduce ourselves a little bit here, and we'll give our district information and who we're representing. So, Commissioner Roach.
Great.
I'm Ricky Roach, Koochiching Commissioner, District 2.
Adam McIntyre, Koochiching County Commissioner.
Dale Erickson, Koochiching County, District number 5, which is most of western Koochiching and southern Koochiching.
Dexter Hill, Koochiching County Commissioner, areas of the Little Fork River, District 1.
Jason Schoblum, Koochiching Commissioner, and that's District 4. Districts 1 and 5 primarily have most of the land and water, south and west of our localized community here. So thanks for the interview.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for accommodating us on WebEx here. Personally, I sincerely wish I could be there in person. I would love an excuse to head up to your neck of the woods, but unfortunately the logistics don't work out well today. And likewise with introductions, like Matt said, I'm Jeff Weiss. I'm a floodplain engineer here with the DNR. And then I'll let Seal introduce herself as well.
Hi, I'm Seal Strauss. I'm the State Floodplain Manager, and welcome the opportunity to talk.
I have a slide coming up here just kind of doing a little more introduction of what Seal and I do, but just to describe it briefly, the work I do works on some of the technical aspects of modeling and mapping. The maps with FEMA, we coordinate with FEMA to do that technical side of things. And then SEAL takes care of the other side of things. So we partner a lot on floodplain issues around the state. We have to coordinate quite a bit on a lot of issues. So kind of can't have one without the other. So SEAL helps take care of the National Flood Insurance Program issues within the state, regulations, ordinances, and things like that. So yeah, it's hard to have one of us without the other one. We have to coordinate quite a bit. And as we go through this, I love this to be conversational. So if you all have questions and want to dive into more details, feel free to interrupt as we're going through things. To give an overview of what we wanted to go through here today, kind of already did the introductions, but I wanted to walk through some of the background issues we learned from Mr. Nguyen, and go through some background information about what goes into the models and maps when they're updated by FEMA. Talk a little bit about what we are currently doing now, what we can do, and then Seal has some more information about NFIP participation. This next slide was, we basically already covered all this, we don't need to go through this part again. Mr. Nguyen already introduced this part of things, but we understand that there are questions about the benefits of the National Flood Insurance Program and what that provides for communities in Koochiching County, and then also questions about revised mapping that became effective in 2022. And Matt provided a couple of examples of where some of the mapping has changed, just to kind of highlight some of those areas in here. He provided a handful of different spots just to kind of show a couple different spots where there's some obvious differences here. You can see my mouse in the screen, even following the arrow here. You can see the dotted parts on the map on the left are kind of showing the old maps that went back to 1996, and there's probably a very similar map even before then, but this was what the map in 1996 looked like, and this is what, on the right side, is the newer map that was effective in 2022. That shows, so you can see it's pretty obvious how things changed, how things got a lot wider between 1996 and 2022. This was a section of the Little Fork River, just a little bit downstream of Little Fork itself, the town of Little Fork, and then this example happens to also be on the Little Fork River. Didn't mean to pick that one twice, but it just worked out that way. This is right at the confluence with Rainy River. They're in the north end of the county too. So another slide, you can see how things definitely got wider in some spots.
Hey Jeff, if you could go back to the last slide there for a minute, I just will make a comment to our board about this location. So this particular location, we had a permit request to build a building in this area, and all the buildings that they had fell within the new floodplain, but did not fall within the 1996 mapping. And so when they applied for the permit, they were surprised to find out that they were subject to the floodplain, requirements. And then there was issues related to elevating for them. What they ended up doing was, I believe, receiving a variance. Or in this case, or was it a conditional use permit? It's one of the two. I can't remember which one. But regardless, I think it was a variance. So that allowed them alternative measures for a storage building. They had to put flood vents in and build it in a way that had the least amount of risk to secure it to the ground, making sure that there's no issues if a flood ever hit it. So. Continue on. Sorry, I just wanted to just point out the specifics of that location.
Great, thanks for adding the context here. To jump off on that a little bit more, when questions like this come up, wondering, why are the maps so different compared from 1996 to 2022? Like, why is there so much difference in the map floodplain between these two different versions? Is what my interpretation is some of the questions that you all are working through, and I would like to understand more. Kind of making that assumption that if you all want to understand something different or have different questions on that, please help me steer that conversation so we can make sure we're giving you the information that you're looking for. Because if I jump ahead to this slide, that's a lot of what I want to understand from you all here today too. First and foremost, I want to make sure that we understand what questions and concerns you all have. Not going to pretend that I have, or that we both have all the answers that we can provide today, but we'll want to provide some answers where we have, where it's feasible, based on some assumptions about what you all are looking for. We do have some stuff in the slides that will hopefully answer some questions, but first and foremost, yeah, like I said, I want to make sure we understand what your questions and concerns are. And then I also want to get into just talking about what the next steps are that we can do here in the next few months, and just kind of give an idea what that might look like, a couple months down the road. Does that all work for you all? And does a summary of what kind of described before as far as background issues and stuff that Matt brought up already, are those the main questions and concerns you all have, or are there other things that you all have that you're looking for information about?
Any help with leniency in this program?
So the question about help with leniency, is that what I heard?
Well, yeah, I think some of the concern that we've had, some of the discussions that we've had have been with not participating in this floodplain, and what would be the consequence of that. That's some of the discussion that we've had.
And the idea behind that is then the question would be whether or not we need to enforce floodplain regulations. Right now we've adopted a floodplain ordinance. It's what's required to be a participant in the floodplain insurance program. But what would happen if we didn't participate, and what's our requirements related to floodplains, or are the people still subject to the floodplain rules regardless if we participate or not? So those are, I think, questions that the board would have.
Okay. And we have slides on that aspect toward the end of the presentation. So good to know that you do want to talk about that.
Thank you.
So the next handful of slides, especially if you all have printouts on this already, the next handful of slides kind of gets into some of the background information that goes into the mapping itself. Is this information that you all would be interested in diving through, or we could go through it quickly, we could go through it in detail, it kind of depends on what you all want to do. But
I think it'd be good to go through it all there, if you could.
Okay, be happy to do so. And I'll try not to get too far into the weeds, but we can always dive further into details if you have questions. So
Jeff, if you could just, so from our room is an echoey room, so if you could just speak more slowly when you're presenting, that'd be great. Appreciate that.
I will do so. Thank you for the reminder, because I tend to speak quickly, so I will be I will try to be conscious about speaking a little bit more slowly and deliberately. All right, I will start here. The background information I want to go over here is talking about the different kinds of zones that are on FEMA maps, a little bit of the history of FEMA mapping in Koochiching County, and then I want to go through some of the model inputs to help understand, or to try to help explain how the new maps came about, just to try to provide that kind of background information about why the maps changed so much from 1996 to 2022. First of all, there are two main zones on maps in most places, and these are the only two zones that are in Koochiching County. There is Zone AE and Zone A. Zone AE is usually referred to as a detailed study, so there's a lot of effort that goes into that kind of study. There's usually survey information for the river, and there's a lot more detail that goes into the analysis. In the next couple of slides, I'll show that the only place that there is the Zone AE, Koochiching County, is right along International Falls in Rainier, just part of the Rainier River up in that part of the county. The rest of the county is Zone A floodplains. So refer to these more as approximate studies. Not as much detail goes into the analysis, and therefore elevations are not published on the maps. Methodologies to develop Zone A delineations have advanced quite a bit over the last 20 plus years. So that there's actually a lot more information that goes into these than there used to be, and that actually is contributing to the changes in the maps between 1996 and 2022. This next slide kind of illustrates the differences between the Zone AEs and the Zone A's. The reds are the Zone AE areas. So the left side shows the whole state. You can see there aren't very many red AE areas. Those are mostly limited to major rivers, also or streams within larger communities. So you can see there's a lot of red along the Minnesota River here. That there's even some parts of the Minnesota River down by Mankato that are still Zone A. As the Mississippi River comes across, there are some Zone A's, some Zone AEs through there, but and then once you get into say like Rochester and Duluth, the Twin Cities, some other areas do have, there are some Zone AE areas, but most of the state is Zone A for the state. And on the right side, you can see this is zoomed into the county here, so you can see that Zone AE is only right up along on the Rainier River, International Falls, Rainier, that neck of the woods here. Your neighbors to the west, Lake of the Woods County, these are lines through Lake of the Woods itself, as you surely know. And then there's a couple red lines here on the Roseau River, here in Roseau as well. So you had a few things like that. But as you can see, zoomed into your particular area, it's mostly Zone A's, except for just a few things here and there that are Zone A's.
Hey Jeff, one question on this. So the Zone A and Zone AE studies, they're done by FEMA, not by the state. Is that correct?
Sometimes they're done by the state. When we do them, we are doing with grants from FEMA.
Okay.
So we do have a handful of projects that we're working on around the state right now. Koochiching County happened to be studied by, sometimes FEMA does the work through one of their contractors.
Okay.
And Koochiching County was done through one of their contractors. So we don't have the capacity to do all the studies when they need to be done. So if we don't have the capacity, then FEMA gives it to the contractor to do instead.
Thank you.
But if at all possible, we try to do them. I think we do a pretty good job, but this was a situation where we didn't have the capacity when this was being done. The next couple slides highlight a little bit more about the differences between Zone A's and AE's. This is more just to help you come up the learning curve here. There's a lot to come up and understand about what these different designations are on the maps. So this is just trying to provide a little bit more background information for you all. In the mapped AE area, Zone AE, it shows 3 different flood zones. The kind of the hatched area coming across here in the middle, that's generally called the floodway. That's where the flows are deepest and velocities are highest. So basically, you don't want to put anything in that. You don't want to have structures or houses or fill or other places there, because that's where the vast majority of that flow on that stream is moving. So the floodways are really, really important to make sure that we're not causing flood issues either downstream or upstream. If you fill in a whole bunch of area in the floodway, you're going to cause a problem someplace upstream or downstream. So that's why these areas end up being really important for floodplain management. The lighter blue areas outside of that is what we call the flood fringe, which is kind of the edges of the floodplain. This would be for the 100-year floodplain. Is usually how it's often referred to as. And the velocities might be lower, the depths might be shallower, but water is still getting to the edges of that lighter blue hatch that you might see on the maps. And then in the zone AE areas, they also have kind of orange brownish area that's also mapped. That is mapped as the 500-year floodplain. It's on the maps themselves, it's labeled as the 0.2% annual chance flood, but it's colloquially, everybody refers to it as the 500-year floodplain.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah, go for it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. When you're done with the slide, I have just a comment for the board on this.
Perfect timing.
So, guys, on the orange area, that's the medium flood risk or the 0.2% chance. That's not an area that we regulate. It's just to show that there might be risk of flood, 500-year flood. So when someone looks at it, they can say, oh, well, maybe I don't want to develop in that area if I have another option. And it's just to give them a sense of that, but it's not regulated by this program, other than it's more informational. The floodway versus the flood fringe, we get into this when people are applying for permits. I think, like Jeff said, they don't want to see any buildings in the floodway, and as you can see, it varies in different areas. And so, one question to Jeff is, and maybe this is a longer conversation, but the floodway or the seal, the floodway, is there we talk about the 100-year high water mark being the flood fringe. Where does that floodway, is it a 25-year occurrence? Is it a 10-year occurrence, the floodway typically? How do you kind of define that floodway area? Is there any way to just kind of, I'm trying to understand it from the standpoint of communicating it to the public. How do we communicate that? I understand it's where the main water is, but when many people think about it, they think of the main channel, right? And how do I express to them maybe it encompasses a little more than the main channel?
Right. That's a really good question. And also a great addition to clarify that the medium risk flood risk area is not regulated. But to answer the question about the floodway itself, we studied the floodway with the 100-year flood information. it doesn't correspond to a different flood elevation. It's studied with the 100-year. The criteria for the floodway is trying to figure out a way to. I wasn't anticipating this question, so I don't have an answer ready to top of my head. So bear with me for just a second here.
I'm sorry about that.
No worries. But for a floodway, there is the floodway is something where it imagines that the flood fringe is fully filled. So in this photo, like if all of the light blue polygon around the floodway, if all that area was filled, if different applicants came to the board and asked to fill in all this area. Actually, I don't even know where this map is, but just imagine this is it's in your community right now. If this whole flood fringe was filled, they want to know what would happen to the flood elevation in the floodway itself. The state rules say that the flood elevation in the floodway cannot increase by more than half a foot in that situation. So that means that the depth of the flooding in the flood fringe area and the velocities through there are fairly low because imagine filling in all that floodway and only increasing the flood level by half a foot. That's a lot of fill to have a fairly small impact there. That's the simplest way I can think of to explain it. There's a little more nuance to that. That's kind of the most straightforward way I can think of explaining it. I did not copy over slides that might have shown this a little bit better.
And not necessary, Jeff. I just kind of went to the weeds there a little bit. But bottom line is that you imagine that the entire 100-year flood area is flooded, and then those areas that maybe have, so the blue areas might have not very much flow, they're more backwater, and the area that is hatched might have actual flow and would push something down the waterway is basically what you're trying to say. Is that correct? Would that make sense?
Yep, that's a pretty good way to summarize it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so you can imagine if there's not very much velocity off on the side and most of the water is coming through the hatched area, you fill in those edges, water's still going to get through there okay. The downside would be, if you have that wider part of the floodplain there, you will get storage out there. Water kind of fills that up. And if you lose that storage in the floodplain, that will have some other consequences too. But yeah, the way you summarize it in the map is pretty spot on.
Thank you.
Any other questions about this slide or zoning areas before? Otherwise, I was going to move into the zone A's, talk about those a little more.
Yeah.
Ready for zone A's?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Zone A's are a little different. They only show the 100-year floodplain, and so it only shows what they call the high flood risk zone. That is a zone A. The different maps kind of show things a little bit differently, and anything that's not in there is referred to as a low flood risk area. So different areas of maps look a little bit different. On the left side, you kind of see more of a shaded polygon. This happens to be the Des Moines River down in southwest Minnesota. So you can kind of see that shaded polygon around the Des Moines River itself. On the right side, it's a little bit more of the older style, where you kind of have the dots around the edge of the floodplain, but still the same idea. What's in the dotted area is showing the 100-year floodplain for a zone A area. I think this might be I don't remember where this area is, but the map looks different, but the end effect is the same. And the disadvantage for both of these old style maps is there's no aerial photo behind it, so you're still kind of doing your best to figure out if you have a property or something on the edge of these. There's not a lot of information going on. You're doing your best to work with these edges, especially when there's this dotted outline here. It's not the most easy format to use to understand if someone is in or is out of that match floodplain. Fortunately, with the newer maps, they have added in aerial photos behind And so you're able to see that blue area right over the river, and then you're able to see communities, or the community adjacent to that map floodplain at the same time. So it's a lot easier to understand where the edge of the floodplain is and where it's not. The other big advantage with these newer maps is, and I'll get to that in the next couple slides, is when they map the floodplains for the newer maps, they are using up-to-date LiDAR information. Some of the old maps back from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they weren't necessarily using LiDAR. Maybe the best they could use would be old USGS quad maps. But now with LiDAR available, they're able to get these delineations to be quite accurate compared to what the models are saying the elevations are for that given stream. So then these edges end up being pretty darn accurate compared to, like I said, compared to what the model is saying. So now as we jump into a little bit more the history of the mapping here in Koochiching County, I may not have absolutely everything accurate here, but this is what I was able to find for what we have on file. There was a county a map done in 1977 for Koochiching County, and that was updated in 1986. This would be, from what I could see for information we have, that only included the county area, did not include any incorporated areas. Not to say something wasn't done in incorporated areas, but what we have only included unincorporated areas within the larger county. Then in 1991, there was a map completed in Rainier. 1996 in International Falls. That would have been also when the rest of the county was updated as well. And then they used to do these mappings based on the county, then they'd have a separate map inside of the city. So there was one study that was just for International Falls, another study that was just for Rainier, then another study that was for the rest of the county. Now, with the newer studies that they do in 2022, they meshed all of those together into one study, which is a lot easier to use because now you're not trying to move back and forth between different sets of maps and different studies to understand what's going on in the county.
Jeff, I'll just jump in there quick. So the 2022 mapping is what we adopted as part of our ordinance in 22. So that's the newest mapping.
Right, yep, correct. And Celia, do you have any other history that I accidentally left out of this?
Yeah, I would just add that the 1977 era map was a really quick and dirty map. That was that more dot-looking map that you got. Honestly, it looks like they didn't do a whole lot of updating in 96 in the county. When they did the updates in the 90s, it really varied depending on the community. So, and when you would get to the other cities besides Rainier or International Falls, it would just have a blank, and there wasn't a map for some of those other cities until the 22 effort, where they did map all the cities, and some of the cities did get new areas identified as higher risk.
And to jump off on that a little bit, when Seal says that some of those older maps were kind of quick and dirty, sometimes the zone A's are referred to as approximate areas, and there's not usually a lot of documentation about exactly what was done to determine those floodplain boundaries. I'm actually using this slide as an example here, just kind of comparing the 1996 maps to 2022. It looked like the 1996 map still used the dotted outline. I was surprised that seemed to be the case, but a lot of times for these Zone A areas, especially back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there weren't models that were completed to estimate those floodplains. Usually that wasn't the case anyway. And like I was trying to say before, there's not very much documentation about how they determined the edge of that floodplain. Sometimes there is, but most of the time there's not that documentation. Recently, we were trying to do a big effort internally where we were cleaning up a lot of files that were, years, decades old. And for some counties, I found maps where somebody was just drawing a line, estimating the edge of the floodplain. There wasn't necessarily analysis that was going to it is just what somebody who knew that river said, yeah, the floodplain is about this big. You know, it wasn't necessarily based on much besides just general knowledge of the stream. So it didn't necessarily correspond to, say, a 100-year flood or anything in particular. It was just kind of somebody's knowledge of what was going on in the stream. And I think that was kind of the case for a lot of the areas around the state and the country for these Zone A areas. Now, the newer maps, especially the last 15 plus years, they've been trying to use models to develop as the basis for the floodplain. So all new maps, including for the 2022 maps, all new maps will have, they call it model maps. So if they're going to map the floodplain, they want a model or some other analysis to say, this is why this floodplain is the way it is. That way there's a little more oomph behind it to make sure that makes some sense. We do have, for example, we do have some examples in other counties in the state where somebody mapped the floodplain based on the soil type, which it was a hydric soil, then it was mapped as a floodplain. So it ended up not making a lot of sense in a lot of cases, and we're working on trying to fix some of those spots too. So just another example of, you know, there are some different methods that were done years or decades ago that we're still working through trying to update and fix actively right now. So next I was going to go into some of the inputs that go into the models themselves, just to try to help explain a little bit about, you know, how they got those new delineations for the Zone A areas.
So we're into the 22 mapping. This is how you calculate 22 mapping, or some of the areas?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. Yeah. So there's two main inputs that go into the model. One, you have cross-section information. So you'll have dozens or maybe hundreds of cross-sections for the river that are modeled for the river, and then you also have to estimate how much water is going through the river for, if you're looking at a 10-year flood or a 50-year flood or a 100-year flood, they try to estimate those different flows going to the river. So these are the two main inputs that we're looking at. I think I'm going to walk through a little bit of information about how these two things are generated. And I also wanted to, you know, if I was doing this as a regular presentation, I was going to have this coming as another clip, but the USGS provides a lot of critical information to help both with cross-section information and the flows, and I'll show some examples of the information they have in Koochiching County is really valuable and really helpful. So first of all, USGS does a lot to help coordinate collection of LiDAR data around the country and around the state. So, you know, a lot of you may know old USGS quad maps where used to be the best source of topographic information for different parts of the county. A lot of times they were pretty accurate, but if you have used them at all, I'm sure you know that there's places where they weren't the most accurate. Now the USGS helps coordinate collecting LiDAR around the state, like I said. And the state agencies get involved in this too, because lots of different state agencies use this data. But they have collected LiDAR through Koochiching County. I don't remember what year they collected up there, but it was actually a fairly early collection. I want to think that went back to like 1919 or 2020, I'm sorry, 2019 or 2020, something like that. That neck of the woods was a fairly early collection. Some of the more later collections have been over in the Red River Valley, but they've been working around the state to update all the LiDAR around the state over the last few years. And now they do have that all. They're working on developing a new statewide data set for contours over the whole state. And then when we have that LiDAR, we're able to cut cross-sections directly from that LiDAR. So if I go back to this example for Little Fork River, we see the old delineation on the left side, but then on the right side, we show the different cross-sections that were included in the model. So this is a different figure than I was showing before. This figure is from our lake and flood elevations online viewer. And most days on that viewer, it shows these pink lines on here with these elevations. These are the cross-sections that were from the model and the elevations for the 100-year flood for the model for that stream. Unfortunately, right now, these pink lines are not showing up on that. We're working on trying to get that fixed, but most days this is there, and it ends up being a resource I use almost daily. So I wanted to highlight, I have the yellow circle here over this cross-section, so I want to show you what that cross-section looks like in the model.
Hey, Jeff, could I just interject here for a minute? So Whitney and I use this when someone's getting a permit. We'll go online, we'll print a FEMA map, we'll look at this map through the state. These elevations are basis for what their lowest floor, including bottom of crawl space and bottom of basement, has to be above. It has to be, in this case, it's a river, so it has to be 1.5 feet above that elevation that he's highlighted there. So if that was in that area, they were building, so they would be building outside of the shaded area. In addition, they'd have to be 1.5 feet above that elevation. So just to give you a sense of how we administer it and what's required for us. So
even outside of the shaded area?
So outside of the shaded area, it might be within a couple feet of the shaded area will have an elevation, and typically the shaded area will match that circled elevation that he has highlighted. So that shaded area in that location, I would suspect, is going to be really close to the elevation that they show on the cross section that's highlighted there. But in addition, the floodplain rules say you must be on a river 1.5 feet above when you build something, so that gives you a little extra leeway if a flood comes. So that you're not right on the 100-year flood elevation with your building, you're 1.5 feet above it. Seal, do you have something more to say about that? Can you provide the board a little bit more on that?
Right, that's that's the basic requirement. Is our state minimum for over 50 years has been that foot of freeboard, that at least 1 foot. So like on the lake, it would be the 1 foot, and it's 1.5 on the rivers, because Jeff was talking about how they look at filling in part of the floodplain and allowing that increase to be a maximum of 1/2 foot in Minnesota. So that's allowing for that people legally can be filling and causing a little bit of an increase. So we take that into account for figuring out what our low floors are going to be.
Thank you.
One other thing I would mention is within even if it's a narrow floodplain, the county does have a shoreline management ordinance, and that applies within 300 feet of the river, and we still have those same minimum elevations for the lowest floors within the entire shoreline district.
So it encompasses, through the shoreline ordinance and the floodplain ordinance, it encompasses all lands within the shoreline area.
Correct, yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Any other? Okay. Next, I'll move to show the cross section for that particular circle area. And there's nothing unique about this cross section. I picked it because it was in the middle of the picture, and it happened to be mostly north-south, so it wasn't something that was kind of going diagonal. So it made it easy to circle, literally. So there's nothing unique or special about this cross section, but the black kind of squiggles over here is the information that was pulled directly from the LiDAR information that USGS flew over the county. And one thing I want to point out here is the vertical scale is very different than the horizontal scale. The horizontal scale, this is from side to side, this is over 3,000 feet, almost 4,000 feet from left to right, but vertical, it's about 20 feet. maybe 25 feet. So very different scales. So, on the landscape, this slope is not nearly that steep. It's just skewed because of the different vertical and horizontal scales. But I think I do even have this model open, so we can even flip through the model if that's something you all are curious about. But just wanted to highlight, this is, when we cut these cross sections, we just pulling this information directly from the LiDAR data and then putting the flows through there.
So Jeff, when we're looking at that cross section, the main channel of the river is probably the deepest and most right area that's lower on the page. Right. That's the main channel, and then as you go to the left there, that's probably a floodplain flatter area, and then as you go up the slope, it starts to change. So.
Yep, exactly. That's a perfect summary. Perfect summary. So you can see that it goes from floodplain flat here. It doesn't take very far before it gets out of the water altogether. If I had the model open, you can see that it might be, it ticks at the bottom probably every 200 feet. So it's less than 100 feet from the 10-year flood to the 500-year flood. So it's a fairly short distance there in the big scheme of things between, because the 10-year flood is a lot smaller than a 100-year flood. But if we go back to this slide, you can kind of see this cross-section is cutting across here. So just based on that LiDAR cross-section, you can see that, this part of this whole delineation was pretty inaccurate. That would have been a low area. Why it wasn't mapped before, I don't know if anybody will ever know, but that just kind of happens to illustrate that, that's a spot that would have been inaccurate on the old map. It would have been at risk of flooding even before 10-year event. The other thing that USGS does is they operate river gauges around the country. And they're monitoring flow on a daily basis. Sometimes they're taking the flow every 15 minutes. The left side shows different gauges in this area. These are not all USGS gauges. There are some other DNR gauges. NPCA has some different gauges. And I circled 3 of them just to highlight a couple. There's USGS flows at Manitou Rapids on Green River from 1928, and Big Fork and Little Fork from all the way back to 1910. I wanted to highlight these because these data sets are golden. It's pretty rare that we have data sets that date back this far. Usually, if we have 30 or 40 years of data, that's often that's as good as we can get. But having something like this that dates back 100 years is somewhat rare and extremely valuable to understand the history of flooding on those rivers and what trends there are for flooding on those rivers as well. So to highlight that a little bit, here's the graph from the USGS gauge for Big Fork. It shows the annual peak flow from each year dating back to the start of this gauge. You can see there was a gap in here from 1914 up to about 1928. So really the continuous gauging from about 1928, 1929 through present day. This is incredibly valuable information to understand the potential for flooding on the Big Fork River. So you can see this biggest flood here was probably about back in 1951. Another big one here about 77, 78, somewhere in there. You can kind of get that understanding of what that history and risk is. And sometimes if there's a big, let's say there's a big dam that's built in a watershed that's happens to be in, say, 1988, then you can say, well, stuff before 1988 is kind of an old situation, and moving forward is kind of a brand new situation. So there's ways you can take apart this data and understand what is the best data to use. And similar on Little Fork River, this also dates back to 1910. There is a gap, but it's a smaller gap than Big Fork. But anyway, you can see also really valuable information Just like Big Fork, there was a big flood in about 1951. Looks like there's another big one in about 1916. Unfortunately, if we go back to Big Fork, we're missing that data in 1916, so it'd be nice to kind of correlate those to see, like, okay, there was a big flood in both these on the same year, but we just don't have that data in Big Fork, unfortunately. But it doesn't mean that, you know, this data is still super valuable, but it's, anytime there's a gap in the data, it creates some uncertainty. So you can kind of see just on this gap, you can see where there have been big floods recently. You can see even the last few years. I know you all had a lot of flooding in the last few years on Little Fork. These have all been, pretty high historic compared to historical trends that are all usually a lot lower. So you all know this and experience this. So I don't need to tell you that you've had flooding issues in the last few years.
Jeff, could I just ask a question, and maybe this is directed a little bit towards Destry, Commissioner Hill. I know that, like on the Little Fork area, there was a rail bridge that affected flooding. And maybe, I don't know, is there, on those gauges, physical changes. So the rail bridge collapsed, I don't know what year.
About 1998 or 99, the old railroad trestle bridge fell in during ice out. And that was the highest, and my land adjoins that old railroad bridge. So when that collapsed, it backed up the water almost the deepest I've ever seen it, and I've been there since 1996. So when you're talking flooding, now apparently that's nothing to do with 2 years ago, the bridge downstream about 6-7 miles, White's Bridge, was the ice was all jammed up and backed up the water, not as deep as when the railroad bridge collapsed, but it was pretty darn deep. So when we're talking this flooding, maybe 1952 it was just all water in the middle of the summer, but so then I have another question of, in 96, what was the elevation? And now in 2022, it's 8 feet higher, apparently, from
with the mapping.
With the mapping, where did the numbers come from? I mean, during breakup is when we can see high water. Last summer, when we had Cook had the flood and the town flooded, all the water comes this way. The water wasn't that high. I mean, nothing like when the ice goes out and jams up in one of the bridges. If they have bridges that don't have concrete in the middle and they have a free-spanning bridge, we'd have less issues. But I still don't know of anybody that's actually flooded out that I know of. One home, I can say that, and I agree that house is really low. Should have never been built there anyway. But everybody else along that river, I'm struggling with this elevation difference and where people come up with this number.
Well, I grew up in the Red River Valley. In 1996, they had 150 inches of snow there. I'm sure there was 150 inches of snow over here too that year, and I think it got warm that year real quick, and the ice dammed up on all the bridges going across the Red River, and that's what caused Grand Forks and Fargo to flood. It was just kind of an odd year that it broke up so fast and it just jammed up on the bridges.
So my question, I guess, Jeff, would be, how do you account for, when you do the studying of areas, how do you account for those physical features that may have been eliminated? And maybe that's just the story. It would be, okay, that rail bridge maybe is now eliminated, is downstream of this gauge or other data that you're looking at, and now it's no longer there and we can see it in our flow study. Or I'm just trying to understand some of the physical changes over that 100-year period, and how you study that.
Right. So on this particular slide, this is showing the peak flow here on the left side. So it's showing the annual flow in cubic feet per second. I know I haven't worked on how the USGS figures out where to put their gauges. I do know that they work to understanding sort of different physical things may be present to try to correct for those. I think they also try to put them in locations where there's not going to be something else that's likely to have an impact on an annual basis. So for instance, putting a gauge immediately upstream of a bridge would probably be a bad idea for exactly the reasons you all are talking about. If you have ice jams and other debris jams that are causing water to go up, it's going to make it harder to understand what that estimated flow for the stream would be. So they try to put it in a location where you're not going to have those kind of influences on the river, if that makes sense.
And was that rail bridge downstream or upstream of the one in the bridge in Little Fork? Upstream.
Well, which one? The one in Little Fork was downstream. The White's Bridge in 71 was upstream. So it was in between the two. And last year, 2 years ago, it backed up on White's Bridge, and it got pretty darn high. When the railroad bridge went out, that's in between the two, and that even got higher yet. But it was a long ways from. And this floodplain, the way they got it mapped out now, it's changed a lot. And I've never seen the water that high, not even when the ice jams up. So I'm trying to wrap my head around how all of a sudden it changes like 8 feet, and that's huge. You know, it doesn't. I guess what really matters is people having to buy flood insurance now all of a sudden because somebody decided to change the mapping, and I'd like to understand how they got that number.
Right. So that's where a gauge like this in Little Fork ends up being really valuable, because since there is about 100 years more of data, you can basically say, let's say there's exactly 100 years of data. An easy way to say that, easy way to use that data would say the biggest flood during that 100 years is the 100-year flood. And then might be the second biggest one is going to be about something that's happened at least twice in that 50 years, in that 100 years, is going to be about equal to that 50-year flood. So it's going to happen twice in that 100 years. Something that's happened at least 10 times during that 100 years is going to be about the 10-year flood. That's kind of, roughly how it works out, if that makes sense. So in this case, you can see there's these two big ones that happened, granted a long time ago, but there are two big ones that were estimated at about 25,000 CFS. Kind of a long time ago. The more recent ones are closer to 20,000 CFS, but the point is that you use this whole long period of record to try to estimate how big of a flood can there be on that stream based on history. This doesn't do anything to look into the future about anything changes that are happening, changes to precipitation trends. If we get wetter or drier. It's just looking back in history and saying this is how big of a flood to have gotten on this stream during the monitoring record that we have.
So we're seeing 1916 and 1950 are the high peak flows during that period of time.
Yeah.
Okay. Flow doesn't mean flood though.
Right. Sometimes there are other factors that create high water that's more than just how much water is going through. And actually, when we do the modeling, we don't assume ice jams, we don't assume debris jams, because it's how much do you assume a bridge is getting clogged with ice jams or debris jams? That's a really hard thing to estimate. So that's not actually included in part of it. So that's actually part of the reason why earlier when Matt was talking about the required lowest floor elevation, that helps provide some factor of safety if there is those extra factors that are creating water to come higher than the flow might otherwise indicate. If there is an ice jam, debris jam, if the bridge falls in and effectively creates a dam in the road, it provides a little extra factor of safety for some of those nearby buildings. So anyway, that's trying to get at that question of where those elevations come from. It's a combination of looking at this data from the gauges themselves, and then click back up to the LiDAR information, that elevation that's cut through here, and then putting those flows through there. And so that's why these two things are the big factors that help estimate those boundaries for the floodplain.
Hey Jeff, if I could just interject and ask a question. Did you have a chance to compare the flows you're seeing here with this record with the flows that the FEMA contractors used when they did the modeling for the 22 maps?
Yeah, we have. It's still preliminary, but we have looked at it. The flows that the FEMA contractor used, they do look like they were a little higher than what we would get from this data. We've done a preliminary analysis of this data. Actually, you know what? I know we did the Big Fork. I know that's the one they got completed. But anyway, we did the analysis on this data, and what we got here was pretty similar to what the FEMA contractor got. I think it might have been just a little bit lower, but it was pretty similar. It wasn't dramatically different, but it was. And there's some other ways to estimate the flows too. But anyway, we have looked at it. It's at least similar. I think the FEMA contractor was being a little bit conservative. It's a little bit higher, but it's not dramatic. So.
But on the Little Fork, you were seeing it seemed that they had selected a number that was higher than what's shown here. Well, you know what? I'm gonna have it open. I can even look it up here. Bear with me for a second. For the Little Fork, they had a flow of about 27 for this. I can remember where the give me a second here. And Jeff, we don't necessarily need to go into the details, but I think you said that, or you thought that there might be a little bit of a variance between the Little Fork and what you're seeing on these gauges and what they used as an input. There might be a variance.
A little bit, yeah. Okay. And I did get to where I meant to be. It looks like at the Little Fork gauge, they had a flow of about 27,000 CFS, would be a little bit higher than these two here, but so that's why I say it's not dramatically different, but it is a little bit higher. It's a little bit conservative, but if these two floods were the two biggest ones, even if one of them was over 100 years ago, it's that 27,000 CFS isn't dramatically different than what's available in that gauge record. It just hasn't been that high, hasn't had that much flow in the last 70 plus years. It's just, I don't know if you call that good fortune or if things have just changed and we're not going to get those floods again. It's hard to know. But well, those were the two biggest floods that we probably had at that time. So, and over the last 100 years, I would say that those are the two biggest. But so when you study, you could probably maybe study this with that flow rather than the flow that they used, and that might be a possibility to make and a reason to make adjustments on the Little Fork. Right. So, for instance, the flow might go down just a little bit. It's not going to change things dramatically. So, for instance, what they estimated to be the 50-year flood was about 24,000 CFS. It's going to be just below that. So, just as a point of comparison for this particular cross-section, that's probably the difference between, say, the third line and the fourth line here. So it just drops it down a little bit. How many feet? Let's see. I'm going to estimate it's about 1 foot. Sure. I have the model open over here. I don't know if this shows up or not, but well, in some areas, 1 foot might be a big deal, and so any adjustment or any study, anything you can do to provide better mapping that more accurately depicts the floodplain is appreciated. I guess that's because from a standpoint of regulating people and the use of their land, it makes a difference. Every inch makes a difference when we tell them that they have to meet certain requirements. So
So anything that can be done there would be great, so.
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep looking. That's a good segue to the next part of things here. So, you know, what we can do now, we can keep looking into the streams here in Koochiching County. So we're already working on a study on the Rainy River to correct errors. We found some errors in the data study in the mapping on Rainy River, and we actually have a contract with FEMA to do that work. And we're coordinating with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as well on that. We're running under budget on that work, so that gives us some extra. We can use some of that extra budget to look at the streams in Koochiching County. We're not done with the Rainy River yet, so I don't know exactly how under budget we are. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and accidentally get in our own way. But we can keep looking at streams, and as we get closer to finishing up Rainy, we'll know a little bit more about how much extra budget we have and how much more we can look at in Kooch here. So anyway, this is a spot where I would love some additional input from you all, and we already talked to Matt about some of the areas that he had identified or heard from, particularly Big Fork, Little Fork, and Rat Root Rivers would be our areas where you all are interested. But if there's any other particular areas that you are interested in, that helps us make sure we're not spending time in areas that are less of a concern. And just one other thing I can say here before I turn it over to Seal or ask questions about priorities, but then as we know a little bit more, we can come back to a future board meeting and just kind of summarize what we're able to look at and what the next steps are from there. And we'll know a little bit more about those next steps at that point. It's a little bit too murky now since we don't know exactly what our available budget is at this point.
Do those priorities sound reasonable to you? Little Fork, Big Fork, and Rat Root?
Yeah.
Any other areas? So those sound good.
Okay. All right, well, I'll start there. And yeah, we'll keep in contact with Matt and figure out when there's going to be time we can come back and tell you all what we found. I think turn it over to Seal to talk about flood insurance and NFIP and things like that if you all are ready to change speeds into this kind of things.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so talking about whether you want to be in the National Flood Insurance Program or not, it is a national program. It's been around since '68. We adopted regulations at the state level a year after, so it's been around for a long time. And basically, by being in the program, here's some of the main benefits you get, is that anyone in the county can choose to buy flood insurance. It is mandatory if your building is in that mapped area. And I know that's an area of concern, and having more accurate maps is better. And that's a big part of our discussion here, is having more accurate maps that make sense. But if you do have a loan that is backed by the federal government, which is most types of mortgages, most types of loans where the building is the collateral, then they're required to have flood insurance. And if you're not in the program, they'd have to get a policy from, like Lloyd's of London is the most common place you get a policy if the community is not participating. So they do tend to be expensive and difficult to get. The other thing we remind you is that folks anywhere in the county outside of that mapped area, they can choose to get flood insurance. Or if they don't have, if their mortgage is paid off and they don't have that mandatory purchase requirement, they can still choose to get a flood insurance policy. But when the bank has to require it, they have to have you get a policy with coverage for whatever is left on the loan. So if you've got a $250,000 loan, they have to require you get $250,000 in coverage. Whereas if you don't have that mandatory requirement, you can say, hey, if I get flooded, it's going to be my furnace, my water heater. I'm just going to get a small amount of coverage, And then, of course, the premium would be smaller because you don't have as much coverage.
Seal, can I just ask a question here,
Sure.
or just maybe a comment for the board? So, if the county didn't participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, so we did not adopt an ordinance, people with federally backed loans, so any secondary market loan or any loan backed by the federal government, which is typically your better rate loans, okay?
Yeah.
They're still required to have flood insurance when they're within the mapped area.
Correct. Yeah,
And
but not being in the program doesn't make that requirement go away.
okay, so then for the board, the other part of that is they wouldn't get a flood insurance policy from a regular insurance company. It looks like they would only be eligible through high risk providers such as Lloyd's of London. And did I say that right, Seal? Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to summarize it.
Okay.
Sometimes the private insurers will have a better policy, but we found that they tend to be those higher risk insurers, like you say, the Lloyd's of London, if you're not in the program.
Okay, thank you, Seal.
Okay. The other areas that it's a benefit is if you do have a big flood and if there's a presidential, I didn't spell presidential right, did I? Sorry about that. But if there's a presidential declaration, the couple categories, the emergency things, even if you're not in the program, you can still benefit from. You can still get reimbursement for debris removal and those emergency measures, the first responders being out there, some of the costs for protecting people during the flood. But where the big difference is once the flood's over and you're looking at, gee, what roads got washed out, what culverts got blown out, what public buildings got damaged, and you're looking for reimbursement for those things, that's where you've got to be in the program to get reimbursed. And normally with public assistance, you get reimbursed 75% from FEMA. And in Minnesota, we're unique in that we do have a pot of money to cover the non-federal share during those big disasters. So the other thing that doesn't come up as often is sometimes we'll have a presidential declaration where homes and businesses have a lot of damage in the county, and we have an individual assistance declaration. We had one last year in many of the counties in the state, but it's really only the biggest of the floods where we have that. And you do have to be in the program for the citizens to get any benefits when there's individual assistance available. And then the other area would be for FEMA grants, basically. And I can tell you one of our counties that got suspended from the program probably 20 years ago now, and they were out of the program for a while, and they got back in the program when the sheriff wanted to get a certain kind of grant for a special kind of equipment. And that's what prompted the county to get back into the program, because they really wanted to be able to get that grant. So Jeff, next slide. Speaking of flood insurance and claims, I wanted you to have an idea of how many. You don't have a ton of policies in the county. There's currently 22 policies. I don't know how many of those are people who their bank is telling them they have to have it, but tends to be a good share of the policies are people who are told they must have it. The costs, they're not cheap. It's with fees, it's a little over $1,000 is the median amount of the premiums for those who have policies. Again, if they were choosing to get it, just getting a smaller amount of coverage, it could be a smaller amount. It might be more like $500. But in general, we are looking at about $1,000 for policies currently. And then in terms of claims, you haven't had a ton of claims either. You had 15 since for over the last few decades, which that's a good sign that you haven't had a lot of damage to homes and businesses where they needed to make a claim. The average claim has been just under the 20,000 there. It was 18,800 for the average claims in Koochiching over the years. So you're tending to not see houses getting destroyed in big, huge claims like you might in other parts of the state and definitely in other parts of the country. And just to give you a feel for how the individual assistance grants compare to flood insurance, last year there were almost 4,000 families that got some level of a grant because they had damage to the homes and businesses. They got 3,500 range of grant, obviously not amounts to make families whole. It was a fairly small amount of money that FEMA hands out in those rare cases where we have individual assistance declared. Whereas flood insurance, you can make a claim on your flood insurance whether there's a presidential declaration or not. For last year, for that comparison, the average claim was $35,000 for the 127 claims that we had in 2024. Next slide there, Jeff.
Can you ask her, is that based on a $250,000?
Yeah, I just added this in here to give you a little more. I was talking earlier about the emergency reimbursements you get for debris removal, for emergency protection. This slide gets a little bit more into the detail of what's covered in those categories. But category A and B, the emergency stuff, is available whether you're in the program or not. The longer-term repair of roads, bridges, water control facilities, utilities, buildings, public buildings. That list gets into what's covered if you are in the program. And then I think the last slide here, and Matt's talked about this, that you do have an ordinance that's the main responsibility of being in the program is you adopt an ordinance that's compliant, and you administer that ordinance. That Matt, Whitney, and your staff, they're enforcing those requirements that you have to have a permit for any development in the floodplain. And FEMA defines development as buildings, but also grading, filling, anything where you're moving around the dirt in the floodplain, because if you move that dirt around, you're changing the shape of the container the water has to go through, and you could be pushing water onto new people and creating more of a risk. So that's part of what they're looking at when they're giving a permit, is that any new buildings have minimum elevations at the right elevation, and that they're not pushing water onto others and making it worse for them. And we do require that they document, especially buildings, that they're built at the right elevation. And you want to keep that in your files as long as those buildings are there. So the question comes up once in a while, well, how often do we need to update our ordinance? In general, you're only required to update it when there's new maps. So we had to update it in 2022, but before that, it would have been 1996 when you had the previous new maps. When you do have our new data from the Rainy River effort there will be what FEMA calls a letter of map revision or a physical map revision, and you will need to update your ordinance. But because you've got a fairly recent ordinance, you'd really just go into the paragraph where we reference a map and say, as updated by letter of map revision number such and such, effective such and such date. It's a really simple amendment. And my third bullet there is the other situation where you would update your ordinance is if you want to be more have a higher standard somewhere in your ordinance, or maybe you adopted one of the higher standards that we showed in our model ordinance, and you say, oh, gee, we don't want to require that anymore. We want to go back to just the state and federal minimums in this area. That's something that you can choose to make updates like that to your ordinance whenever you want. So, I didn't want to get into a lot of the weeds here, but hopefully that was kind of the level you wanted to know about, or if you got questions, certainly can be answered.
Mr. Chair, there was a question from the public. Seal, I think the question was about the flood insurance policy and claim slide. There was a discussion about the median premium and the surcharges, the 1,031. I think you were talking about insurance. I'm going to just hand the speaker over to him and let him ask his questions.
Is this based off the $250,000 policy that you're talking about? Or?
It would probably be a combination of amounts, and that's something I'd have to dig into the individual properties and see what coverage they have. And FEMA's made it harder for me to look at those details in recent years, but it's going to be all, I know the total number of policies and what the median is, so that probably represents some people with that full 250,000 in coverage, which is the most you can get, and probably some people having smaller policies. So that person with the full amount of coverage, their premium might be $2,000 or $3,000, or I've seen, $4,000 or $5,000 depending on where they are. And if questions come up about specific properties, we can look into the situation for those properties.
I think there was a question related to, is there a per $1,000 of value real estate, or improvement value, is there an amount for flood insurance per $1,000 of coverage, I guess?
The way that they calculate the premium is they look at, there's a lot of different factors. The main ones are how high above the flood source are you, how far away are you, do you have a basement, do you have one level, do you have two levels, are you masonry or are you stick built? One of them, though, that is a pretty good size factor is how big what's the square footage, the footprint of the building, and what is the value of the building. So they do take, for every 1,000 of coverage, there's a set amount that you're paying in the premium, but they determine that premium per 1,000 of coverage based on all those different factors.
So just for the board's benefit, I know that in the 2022 flood, we received over $2 million of reimbursement. I can't remember the exact amount, but over $2 million of reimbursement for expenses related to the 2022 flood. So some of those reimbursements would not be eligible if you were not participating in the program. So just to make you aware of that.
Any other questions from anybody? Anybody in the audience? Anybody? Okay, thank you for taking time today. I appreciate you. This is something I know that we've been looking at for quite a while and had a lot of discussion about the changes of the elevations, mostly in some of the areas where it's never been appropriate. Then when you start looking at, we have some other non-compliance type issues as well here and there. The flood was a big thing for us too. I mean, that was a great reimbursement. We were able to help the citizens out a lot. But then when you start looking at insurance premiums at $1,000 a year, and your average payout is $35,000 over a 100-year flood, well, you're paying more in insurance than you are in fixing your house. So there's that, happy balance and happy medium is kind of what we're looking for. So.
For sure, for sure. The one other thing that I wanted to mention that we didn't get into with Jeff was in trying to check the modeling, one of the things that our modelers will try and do is look at, for the flood in 2022, we got high water marks at this place and this place and this place along Little Fork or Big Fork or, on the lake, of course, we've got good records of how high the water got, but kind of ground truthing the information. So, and that's part of what prompted the corrections in Rainy is that we had some surveyed elevations knowing, hey, when we had this flood at this spot, this is how high the water got, and so that's something that. I know we've discussed with staff in the past is that if you do have some of that data, you've got a survey showing, hey, in this flood, on this bridge on the Little Fork or Big Fork, this is how high the water got, then that could be valuable for double checking the modeling and saying, gee, our model does or doesn't match this. Gives us more confidence that the model's accurately reflecting what's there.
Yeah, and see, I've been speaking with them, Seal, about this, and so I've been trying to collect pictures from people with dates on any of the waterways, and then they can point out this is where the water came out, and then we can send the survey office and shoot an elevation of that location, and it's a personal testimony piece of data that I can provide the DNR, Seal, and Jeff, and allow them to look at that as well as their other data. So any of that information from the public, if people want to share that with me, I certainly am interested in trying to gather good data if they've got a good picture, and also this is where the water came to at this certain date. That'd be great.
Yeah, because then we can tie it to the flows in the USGS records and say, oh, okay, this magnitude of a flood, does our modeling make sense?
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Jeff and Seal. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Yes, thank you much. Have a good afternoon.
Happy to do it.
Yep.
And we'll stay in touch with Matt. Keep you all updated on what how much we're able to do and what those results are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for lining this up.
Yeah, I know it's a lot of data, and they did a great job of trying to, we got into the weeds a little bit, but I think it's important, to get as much information so you understand as best you can. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Have a good day.
Thanks.
This time is a public comment. Is anybody in person or online for public comment? No public comments. Do we have any other business? Other business?
Discuss the information at all?
Oh yeah, we have an informational letter from the City of National Falls in response to the LEC letter that we sent via our board motion. It was discussed, and the city is just let us know that they're going for the Koochiching building that board motion to move forward with Carl Anderson for the renovation of the Koochiching building for the police department. And encouraged us to kind of move forward with our LEC, but I still think, there's sure wish they would actually have a meeting with us. That would be kind of nice. I said instead of really not even going through the proper channels, in my opinion. So just kind of looking at a piece of paper and sending it off without actually having a discussion with anyone from the county is a little short-sighted in my opinion. So, but anyway, the letter's a letter, so we'll move forward with that, and it is what it is right now, and I'll thank him for the letter. Any other discussion? All right, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion. Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Roach. Thank you, Commissioner Hill. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we are adjourned.